The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Okay, welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast, everybody. I'm your host, George Grimm, and I'm here this evening with longtime Ranger fans Marc Weissman and Rich Isaak. And we're going to be talking about the Rangers' hiring of Peter Laviolette and the impact that might have on their lineup next season. All right, gentlemen, thanks for coming.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your that you're here with me. Excuse me. Okay, now let me have your thoughts about Laviolette.
Go ahead, Rich, if you want. Rich, you can go first.
Sure. Okay, thanks. I think Laviolette is right out of the Glenn Sather playbook. I think Drury, if he decided to pick him himself, did it because he knew it would be the safe pick out of who was left. Don't think it was imaginative at all. I know when Hines became available, they took the time to speak with him, but he wasn't a better choice than Laviolette. But again, I don't think it was a very imaginative choice at all.
Right. Marc, what do you think?
Well, I guess, you're not alone in that, Rich. I know a lot of people feel that way. There, a lot of use of the term retread on social media about him and some of the other coaches. I was actually in favor of Laviolette pretty much from the beginning, as far as, once all the dust settled and things like that. He's got a strong record. I guess just because he's not he seems like a kind of an obvious choice or maybe a slam dunk choice. If you look at things, that doesn't mean he's a bad choice. I think he's very good. He's obviously got a great record all time. I think he's 8th all time in wins for coaches. And when I think about the fact one knock against him is the number of teams he's been with over the years. It's certainly a lot, most in the Metro Division, most of them. But he has won a cup, albeit a while ago. So that's a plus. And when I think about, sort of retreads or things like that, Mike Keenan went to the finals 3 times before he came here. He never won a cup, but he was with 2 different teams, came in, set the ground rules really fast, literally at the opening press conference. He set the bar high. I wouldn't expect that from a guy like Laviolette, but I don't know. There's a lot of things about him I like. I watched the video. People were sharing the video from the 24/7 when we were in the Winter Classic with Philly. He seemed like he can be really in your face, but he's not, not to the point of being a complete jerk. He's just, he can be very emphatic and call guys out to their face and then also be positive at the same time. To me, that's what you need. I think the biggest thing is, to be honest with you, I think Drury was sort of stuck in the fact that he really had no choice but to fire Gallant because most of the guys that didn't perform to what we would expect against the Devils can't be traded. It's like, yeah, and something had to be done, something significant. All the guys that can be traded are the guys that, you probably wouldn't get a huge return on, really. So I think, the only real impact he could make would be to, do something behind the bench. Because, there's a lot of reasons why I think Gallant deserved to stay, but I also think there were a lot of reasons why I wasn't too happy to see him go. I wasn't unhappy to see him go. Right. So, you know what I mean? So, and I think one of the pluses about Laviolette, his ability to manage the game, in-game changes, those kinds of things, I'm actually looking forward to that because I really feel like there were a lot of times that Gallant didn't really take the reins like he should have during games. For example, calling timeouts. There were times where he made line changes and they had some effectiveness. It wasn't like he was completely ineffective, in games. But I feel like more often than not, there was a lot of like laissez-faire kind of coaching. And if you're a coach, your job is to do something if things aren't going well. I have no problem with making, in-game changes to get the team going. Otherwise, why have a coach back there? So
absolutely.
So that's kind of my summary. I'm like cautiously optimistic. I think there's a lot of things that he could do. He has to, the biggest thing is a big question mark. He's got to figure out how to get Panarin to be a springtime player, and more than one overtime goal. So I think that may be a challenge for any coach, really, not just him. But I think this is, like you said, Drury. He's kind of on the to the point where this is almost maybe his last shot. He's had 3 coaches. If Laviolette doesn't work out or doesn't deliver, significant advancement or even a cup, then Drury's got to be considered to be on the hot seat as well. So and I think Panarin is a big part of that, because you think about Panarin, Mika, and Kreider make up like 30% of their cap. You couldn't really tell that from the playoffs. I mean, I know Kreider had a good game 1 and game 2, but between the 3 of them, that's a third of your investment, and the return that they were getting from those guys is not what they need. So I think that's, if Laviolette and whoever he hires as his assistants, can get more out of them while also incorporating some of the younger guys, then he'll obviously do a good job.
Well, here's a thought, okay? Because I don't get me wrong, I wasn't against Drury firing Gallant.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I wasn't going to use the term retread, but, given who was out there, Laviolette was the safe choice.
Okay.
I would have rather seen Andrew Brunette, for an example.
Okay.
But, the other person who was obviously available, but he has the reputation of being even more direct with players, is Babcock. And he landed in Columbus.
Right.
Right.
But having said that, as far as Panarin goes, Panarin needs to play with people who will shoot the puck. And the other thing is, really what we saw this past season is, while they had success at times, I don't really think Trocheck is the right center for him.
Right.
I would try Hedl with Panarin and a guy and the kind of player we don't have on this team, another bruising right wing. Someone who could do the dirty work in the corners, and let Trocheck slip into a role that I believe he's built for, the third line checking center.
Mm-hmm.
But
that would actually do a couple things. I mean, I think you're right. All year long, I kept saying, wait till the playoffs. As far as Trocheck goes, I really thought he would really step it up, and he didn't, in my mind, to the point where we needed him. But I think what you're saying is, if you drop him to the third line center, or or even a fourth, like a checking center, then potentially that allows you to deal Goudreau, who is, probably getting paid more than what he's returning. Even though, I thought he played admirably in the playoffs. He was one of the few players I thought, he's the kind of guy that you want, but you want more from him,
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, he is who he is. I mean, it's, that when he was in Tampa, he was the cherry on top. It was Yanni Gourde who made that line go. So, yeah, what they need is what everybody thought Jimmy Vesey was going to be when he first came to the NHL.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not who he turned out to be.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So hopefully we see the likes of one of Lafreniere or Kakko moving up into the top 6. You know, this is where the draft busts of Mr. Kravtsov and, you know, prior to that, Elias Anderson come back to bite us.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, to Drury's credit, he cleaned slate as far as or cleaned house as far as the scouting goes. People who drafted him, so that was, you know, and we're not going to see the benefits of that really for many years from now, I think.
No, and I always got the impression that Drury was a guy who wanted to pick someone else at that time, and he got overruled.
Yeah. The other 2 names that came up, I guess they didn't talk to him, but certainly it was, you know, Patrick Waugh, who I wasn't really, he seemed like too much of a loose cannon, although, you know, I guess it's been a while since he's been in the NHL, so, you know, he could have mellowed a bit somewhat. And then the idea of bringing in, you know, the Wolfpack's Knobloch, there was a lot of talk about them. And honestly, when I heard that, the first thing I thought of was, I could see where he makes a lot of sense to be an NHL coach. I feel like where he is now would have made perfect sense to bring him in when we brought in David Quinn. In other words, when the team was sort of in the real, true rebuild, you know, pre-Panarin days, you know, for that year or 2, bringing in a guy like Knobloch would have, because in theory, I was in favor of the idea of bringing in a young coach with a young team and you kind of grow with the team. I mean, I thought that was a good idea. I just, you know, bringing in a coach, though, has no NHL experience, no professional experience, not even just NHL. I mean, Quinn didn't, you know what I mean? At least Knobloch has.
Quinn had been an assistant before.
Well, that's true. That's true. Good point.
And that was the same for Knobloch. Yeah?
Right.
He had coached, I believe, who was it, Erie Otters when Connor McDavid was there.
Right. And he also coached, you know, he took over when, when there was COVID issues, you know, he coached the Rangers.
Right.
For
and he had been Hackstall's assistant in Philly.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
I just knew, I don't know, right off the bat, to your point, because of where they are in the expectations and where Drury is in his sort of term as GM, I was like, there's no way he's hiring. No, it just seemed like too much of a risk. So in that sense, you know what I mean? In that sense, then Laviolette was certainly safer than that, you know, but you know,
I think the reason they never reached out to Roy is that Roy would have been fine discussing things with Drury, but I don't think Roy would have been able to keep his mouth shut with the meddling coming from the owner's special advisor.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. There would have been a lot of going over Drury's head or what. It just, you're right. I kind of like almost like Michel Bergeron, if you remember those days. But
yes, I do.
You know, so you know, I think you're right. There was a part of that. I agree. I mean, but you know, whatever. They didn't even talk to him, so I guess he wasn't even in the mix really.
Right. So, and I think we all understand why they didn't even go near Quenneville. I mean, right now, no matter what you thought of the situation in Chicago while he was there with Kyle Beach, the fact of the matter is he's kryptonite. You know, he's on. I wouldn't go near him now.
I agree with you. I totally
From
agree.
a public relations standpoint alone,
Exactly.
I wouldn't go near him. There's no question.
I was hoping for that they would get would be Mike Sullivan. I was hoping for some musical chairs between Toronto, the Rangers, and Pittsburgh. I was hoping that that Pittsburgh's new GM would bring down Sheldon Keefe with him, and that would force Mike Sullivan to have a job.
Make Sullivan become available.
Oh, that would have been a great choice. I would have been, of course. I mean, that would have been a really good choice. But you also have to remember, Sullivan's a great coach, but, he's got, Crosby and Malkin. I mean, he's got some pretty good players that can make a lot of coaches look really good.
Absolutely.
So you always have to be wary of that. It's a certain, so.
Think of the horses that were already on the Rangers in '94 when Keenan arrived.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So, you had 3 Hall of Famers there already.
Exactly.
And they had recently added Larmer.
Yeah.
So, and then what Keenan had Neil Smith do was add all those grit-type players.
Right.
And it cost them a lot to do so, but on the other hand, without doing that, there would have been no cup.
Oh, for sure. And yet, even though there was one, I mean, they were on the hairy edge of not having. I mean, you really think about it.
Correct.
7 game twice, 1 goal games, overtime. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and yet if they hadn't done that, they probably wouldn't even. Maybe they don't even make the finals. That without doing those moves. But that reminds me that what I was thinking about with Drury. I mean, Drury has been kind of like done a 180 because 2 springs ago, I mean, he did what I consider like, Keenan Smith light at the deadline. I mean, he did a great job bringing in exactly the guys that we need with Mott and Kopp and Vetrano. I mean, he plugged holes that this team had, both, Vetrano, being a shoot first guy, which we desperately need more of them. And Kopp came in and did a good job, and Mott, we saw again this spring, the guy's a really good utility player. And I was, and it just kind of went completely the other way this year, where instead of filling the holes we needed, it's like we went after the big names. Although I love Tarasenko. I was kind of happy about that. But
to be honest,
go ahead. Sorry.
Didn't Tarasenko fill the role that Vetrano filled?
Yeah, a little bit. That's true. That's a good point.
All right. I think the big difference is they went after Kane, who was damaged goods,
right,
as opposed to another grittier type player. And that's what disappointed me about that trade. Right. I wasn't a fan of the trade, even if he'd have been healthier.
Right, exactly.
I think it's true that the chemistry with him. I just think it threw the chemistry of the team off when you put Kane in there. The players didn't know what they should be doing. Should they be feeding Kane? Should they be taking the shots themselves?
Exactly.
I just think it was just throwing a monkey wrench into the mix.
I agree, especially on the power play. The power play looked lost. One, it was like suddenly he was the quarterback and all season long it had been either Fox or Mika with one-timers. It just completely changed the dynamic of that setup, and he wasn't really probably healthy, to even make a difference in lieu of that change. So.
To be honest, he played his best when he played with Trocheck and Kreider as effectively as a third line.
That's right.
That's when he was more effective because he could carry the puck on that line. Because Kreider has plenty of strengths. Carrying the puck is not one of them. Right? Sure.
Right.
If he's skating up ice in a straight line at full speed and you hit him with a pass, perfect.
Right. Exactly.
But he's not the guy you want to ask to try and stick handle. That's not what he's good at.
No, I agree with you. So so I don't know. I don't even know if either one of them are going to be back. But we'll see.
Well, I think they'd like to have Tarasenko back, or even Mikkola, but I don't think they can afford them.
I know. I thought Mikkola did a good job, and now I'm wondering. They signed Jones. Was it yesterday or the other day?
Yeah, yesterday.
And I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know if that means they really believe in him or they signed him so they can deal him easier. So, it could go either way.
It could be either. By the same token, because George and I had a quick discussion about this earlier, is, who knows if Laviolette thinks that Ben Harper can play the style of play he wants to play.
Right. Right.
So this remains to be seen too.
Okay, what about Lafreniere? Do you think they're going to re-sign him or maybe deal him for a high draft choice or something?
I think they're going to re-sign him. I think it's too risky. First of all, you know what I mean? He really hasn't been put in the best position to succeed. I mean, I know the onus is on the player as well as the coach. The player has to earn his keep and move himself up the lineup, and then the coach has to reward him when he does that. But I feel like still it's, you know, the Rangers are in a position now, if they trade somebody like him and he blossoms elsewhere, I mean, you know, it's like you don't want to have another like a Brett Howden situation. I mean, although he wasn't the number one draft pick. But you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you talk about PR. There's the PR we were talking about with the coaching, but I mean, stuff like that. It's like just sign him to like a bridge deal. It's like you don't have to commit to him long term. I understand. I don't think he's earned that. But you know, it's okay to just keep him around. It's a new coach, you know, and they may bring in some other, you know, utility players or something that may, whatever it is. I feel like it's still too early to give up on Lafreniere.
I think you're going to see both he and Miller sign to 2-year bridge deals.
That would be good.
Okay. Yeah.
Simply because I don't think they can afford to do anything else.
No.
Because this way, the player gets paid some more money than they've been making.
Right.
But they're not going to hit a big payday now because there just is no room against the cap for them to do so. Even if you trade Goodrow away.
Right. And that's a good thing because, I mean, that makes them, you know, try to earn their keep a little bit more to get a real good, solid deal. I mean, it's almost like when you're playing in the last year of your deal. I mean, the next 2 years, you know, Miller especially would have to really prove himself to earn a long-term deal. And you also got next summer, Lindgren, Kakko, and Schneider are all up for contracts. So, I mean, you got to look at that. And, you know, it's like you said, it's the whole picture. It's not just about how those players performed or didn't perform.
Right.
It's where they fit in the whole picture.
Two guys we haven't discussed yet are Cully, who had a good year in Hartford and was good in the playoffs for them, and Brennan Ottman.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to bring them up,
Oh, yeah.
They have to make room for those guys.
Absolutely.
Yes. And maybe they're the answer, right, to some of the salary woes because they will be on entry-level contracts.
Right.
And Cully certainly can play a fourth-line role at a minimum.
He's big.
And he's big, and Ottman is a big guy, and he will hit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's got an edge to him, and he's got skill. It's like what you want, you know, maybe a mini Kachuk, you know, that kind of player.
Think back to what we all thought when the Rangers got Kreider on the team finally out of BC.
Right.
We all were hoping, because of his size and strength and speed, but the speed was even more than the guy I'm going to compare him to. We were hoping that his idol growing up was a guy like Cam Neely, that he would have an edge to his game.
Right.
Unfortunately, his personality is more like Rick Nash's. I'm not knocking Nash as a player, a tremendous skilled player, but you know, the Rangers could use a little more snarl in the forward line.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping either or both Cully and Ottman can make the team out of camp. So I can see Ottman starting in Hartford.
Right.
Yeah, I would have no problem with that. I think actually in some ways I would be really okay with that because I feel like guys like Kakko and Lafreniere should have started in Hartford and didn't. And, you know, you don't want to do it now, of course, but
no,
I feel like that kind of, you know, it's just that's the process. That's why it's there. And it's like skipping a grade in school. I mean, it might work out, but there's a lot of other sort of non-skill or non-talent adjustments to try to make to becoming a professional hockey player. And this way they do it in the AHL in Hartford and with less scrutiny, and then they can, work their way up.
And I think that would have been very important in his case, especially given that he lost his final year of juniors to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, he played in the World Juniors with Team Canada and played very well for them. But, at that point, and it's the same with Kakko. In World Juniors, he was outstanding, but, they were beasts compared to the bulk of the players they were playing against.
Right.
We'll see what, it's like Connor Bedard. Listen, this kid looks like he's going to be the next, the next great player, but until he does it at the NHL level, it's a hope. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
All right, let me ask you this: Has any of the Rangers played for Laviolette before in his travels around? I kind of lost track. So
that's a good question. I don't know actually.
Okay.
I'm trying to think.
Are there any players in the Rangers now who you don't think are Laviolette's kind of players?
In a way, Panarin.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of too.
Now, do you think there might be a little bit of bad blood between Panarin and Laviolette? Because Wilson did go out there and beat up Panarin a couple of years ago. Twice.
I don't know if that. I wouldn't say. To me, if it was bad blood, it would be because of the style of play, not because of anything like from that night. It's more like the kind of player he is, and whether if he wants to be if he's stubborn to the point where he will only be a perimeter player. I think that would drive most coaches crazy, but it would drive Laviolette. I think he would want him to, go a little bit more to the slot. Just go to areas where make things happen from all over. So.
And as all of us have either, screamed at the TV, and we even heard, the commentators calling the game say it, Panarin needs to shoot the puck more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you're shooting the puck at the net, not because you're hoping to score, but because later on, the defenders have to wonder what you're going to do with the puck.
Exactly.
If they know all you're doing is looking for that cross-ice pass, that's what they're defending. They're daring you to shoot the puck.
You're right. I must have said like 1,000 times, like if you look back to the highlights or even just remember back to how he played when he won the Hart Trophy or was a finalist for the Hart Trophy, he had about the same number of points, but he had more goals, and he was a threat he was sniping to the point where they had to play the shot, and then you're right, then it's much easier. But if after a while they know you're not going to shoot, then they start putting sticks in the lane, and you become like completely ineffective as opposed to just shooting. So.
Yep. Yeah. So, are any players on the bubble as far as the Rangers are concerned that might not be back?
Well, I think I would be shocked if they. I would be shocked if they re-sign Hayek. Right, he's an unrestricted free agent. And as I said earlier, I have to wonder if Harper will fit the plan as to how Laviolette wants them to play in terms of breaking out of their own zone.
Right.
I mean, I have no worries about guys like, obviously, Lindgren, Fox, Schneider, Trouba. Is Trouba an $8 million guy? No, probably not on another team, but you have to remember at the time they signed him to that contract, too. I don't know.
I think Harper would be like a good seventh defenseman. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I think for long, he's not really built to play long stretches of times, but he's like almost, I mean, not as much offensively, but like Doug Litzer when he came in and played, those kinds of players who just, are utility defensemen. I mean, seventh, kind of thing. Yeah. But I don't, then you have to think about what are you paying a guy, if he's not playing that much.
Right.
That kind of thing.
And the other guy you have to wonder about is, can Matt Robertson finally make the jump from the minors?
Yeah.
Right? Because he's another big guy.
He's been up and down.
And he had, a quick cup of coffee in New York as an injury fill-in. But, he and Jones are the same age. They're both only 22.
Mm-hmm.
And Robertson is still under contract. So, don't know.
Good point.
What do you guys? The other thing about a backup goalie, which we discussed before, the question is Dylan Garand? Do they think he's ready to come up and be a backup? He's only 21 years old. This guy was the goalie of the year his last year of juniors.
Right.
He backstopped Team Canada to a World Junior title. So he's not a bum. I know he played second fiddle to Louis Domingue most of last season, but he played in the playoffs and he played very well this year in the AHL. So.
I mean, do you like him enough to not bring Halak back? I mean, is that to the point where you're thinking that it shouldn't bring Halak back?
The question, he would be cheaper than Halak, which opens up money for other players.
Right.
But do you want a 21-year-old kid sitting on the bench? That's the question.
Yeah.
Development-wise, he's better off in Hartford. He'll get more games.
Right.
Yeah.
But wasn't Domingue the number one goalie down there? I mean,
he was.
So then, how do you even justify bringing like a second-string AHL goalie to become your backup?
Because he was their starting goalie in the AHL playoffs this year, because Domingue was injured, and he carried them, through 3 rounds of playoffs.
Okay.
They were, they almost made it to the finals. I mean, they got outclassed by Hershey in that last round, but that's a team that's, the Wolfpack were a team that scraped their way into the playoffs because some of their players were on the New York roster for the playoffs in the NHL level as the Black Aces.
Right, exactly.
So I have to think they'll try and re-sign Halak or another veteran backup. The question is, would Halak want to come back to New York? And how much will it take? Because as we've discussed before, they don't have a lot of cap space.
No, they don't.
Why is there any reason you think he wouldn't want to come back? Other than
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if he could get more money elsewhere, because clearly he's at the end.
Right.
And the reason he'd play one more year, other than the salary, is he's really close to 300 wins.
Oh, right. That's right.
Right. He's within 3.
Yeah.
Within 5 wins, if I recall, of 300. So he would want to play one more season because then he's almost sure to get it.
Oh, hopefully, yeah. He didn't start off well last year, but he picked it up as the season went on, and
he played very well the second half, no question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
you're right. He's got 295. You're right. He's got 5 away from 300.
Yeah. And you have to remember, when he was piling up those losses early in the season, the team wasn't playing very well either.
No.
True.
No, it didn't. It's only as good as the team in front of him. So.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Who do you think the Rangers might go after in the free agent market, or through a trade?
Well, I know there was talk, once they got as far as they went, people were like, bring Jesper Foss back. And to me, while that makes sense in theory, based on the way he played, all I can think of is the fact that, first of all, my understanding is he took less money to go play the Carolina than what we offered. So for whatever reason, he wasn't keen on staying here.
Well,
that could have been who was running the show then. It could be who was coach. It could be a million reasons why, and maybe things have changed since then.
But remember, you have to remember something, Mark. Carolina has no state income tax.
That's true. So it's like Tampa.
It's like the advantage Tampa has in Florida.
Exactly. Yep.
They don't have to sign for as much to keep as much. You make over $1 million in New York, there's a millionaire's tax, as well as state and city income tax.
Yeah, good point.
It matters.
Good point. That's a good point. But I don't know. Yeah, that's true. You never know. I mean, he obviously played well for it. It's not like he struggled in New York and then blossomed elsewhere. He was a good player.
I mean, he may not want to leave Carolina.
Yeah, right. That's true. And really, when you look back, he won some of the most effective games that Panarin has played as a Ranger were with Foss as a winger. So, and that's not. I don't think that's really lost in the analysis of whether to go after somebody like that.
Well, again, a lot of times we don't see or don't recognize the offensive talent some of the players have because of the roles they're put in.
That's right.
I mean, you mentioned Howden earlier, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody suggested that he's a scoring center, but my God, he had a prominent role with Vegas. Why? Because he was reliable defensively, and look who he was playing with. Those were the guys who were meant to score.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing with Foss. Other than the year or two he played with Panarin and Strome, he was mostly a third, fourth line guy in New York.
That's right. Exactly.
Right? So, we forget. I mean, the case in point for me in terms of what guys are capable of is, and I didn't realize it at the time, when you hear the name Aaron Asham, right, who had a year or two in New York towards the end of his career, what do you think of him as, right? A fourth-line guy.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And a fighter. Right. Aaron Asham scored 45 goals in a season one year in juniors. Guys who make it to the NHL, I don't care what line they're on, they have talent.
The same thing happened with wasn't Brian Boyle a big scorer before he got to the NHL? I mean, it's like, and then he became sort of, designated, bottom six kind of player. So
well, the interesting thing is LA picked him number 4 overall in the draft, in his draft year. He was a scorer in college.
Right.
And that's what they were hoping. But he didn't skate well enough for the NHL level for it to translate.
That's right. Until he hooked up with what's her name, Barbara Underhill.
Yes.
And and that helped. That helped. He didn't make him a elite player, but at least made him a more effective, overall player.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. See, I have one advantage in terms of some of those guys like the LA players of that era, because LA's AHL team used to play here locally in Manchester. In fact, Mark, didn't you go to the NCAA East final up here?
Yes, I did.
So that's the building they used to play in, which is now the Schnooze Center. But at that time, the naming rights were Verizon,
Okay.
and the Manchester Monarchs played in that building. And there were some pretty good players who came through that team who wound up in the NHL.
Weren't the New Haven Nighthawks also LA's team at one point? We split with them or something? I don't know why I remember that they, at one point, it was like half Rangers, half LA Kings. I don't know.
And that's probably true, but once the Monarchs were placed here, they were LA's AHL franchise. And then I don't remember how many years ago the push was, probably 5, 6 years ago. The West Coast teams said they wanted their AHL franchises closer to them.
Okay.
So the Monarchs moved to Southern California, and now they're called the Ontario Reign, as an REIGN.
Right.
But yeah, so the Monarchs had, some guy named Anze Kopitar, had a starting goalie by the name of Jonathan Quick.
Yeah.
Guy named Bruce Boudreau was their head coach.
Oh, wow.
And my kids were in youth hockey in those days, so we went to a lot of those games, and the kids got to play on that sheet before a Monarchs game a couple times. So
Well, that's cool.
that was cool too.
You also, when you mentioned Aaron Asham and you asked, what do you guys think of? The other thing that popped into my head, I think he's one of the 11 players that have played for all tri-state area teams.
Yep.
He played for the Devils, Rangers, and Islanders at one point. So, little claim to fame for him.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but I have to cut this off now. We're running out of time.
Okay.
No problem.
It's been really great having you on. Really great conversation. Marc Weissman and Rich Isaak, I thank you very much for coming on. I hope I can have you back on again. Maybe mid-season we'll talk about how things went, or maybe before that, right before the season, to see how the Rangers did in the off season. And I thank you very much, and I thank everyone for listening to the Retro Rangers podcast. Thank you. Goodbye. Good night.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.